We do want to welcome each one to our class this morning. As we continue to study from the book of Proverbs, we're looking at precious pearls from Proverbs. And this morning I want to look at Proverbs chapter 31. I thought it fitting this morning to be doing that. Look at some things that are stated here, beginning in verse 10 through the end of the chapter. There are many great women that are mentioned in the scripture. You can think about Hannah, the mother of Samuel, Jochebed, the mother of Moses. Of course, think about Timothy's mother and grandmother and what a great influence they had upon him. And of course, Mary, the mother of Jesus. There are many more. We know how powerful the influence of a woman can be in a good way. And so many things that we could say in reference to what the Bible teaches about women and how Paul describes them, for example, in Ephesians chapter 5, especially in reference to wives, and what Paul had to say about women, what Peter had to say about women, as we look in 1 Peter chapter 3. And so, as we look at this chapter here in Proverbs chapter 31, I just want to go through these verses, these 22 verses here in this section. This is an alphabetic acrostic. We look at verses 10 through 31. And what all that simply means is that with each verse, verses 10 through 31, there's 22 verses here, they begin with a consecutive letter in the Hebrew language. You also find this many times in the book of Psalms. And what I mean by that is, if we were doing that with our English language, it would be like verse 1 begins with the letter A. Verse 2 begins with the letter B. Verse 3 begins with the letter C. And so here in these 22 verses, it begins with one from the Hebrew alphabet, and it follows consecutive. There are many good things that are stated. In fact, you probably cannot find a greater passage of Scripture that commends a woman, a wife, as much as these 22 verses do. And you remember the beginning of this book, Solomon speaking to his son, giving him advice, encouraging him, certainly to grow in wisdom and the fear of the Lord, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom. And there are instructions given in reference to be careful about those that you associate with, and certainly be careful about the women you associate with, and so forth. And so I think it very fitting that as the ending of this book, these words are written from the standpoint of, here is the kind of woman that you need. Notice, in times past, on Mother's Day, I would present a lesson in reference to mothers. On Father's Day, I would present a lesson speaking to fathers. And then sometimes I've changed that up. And on Mother's Day, I was speaking in reference to to fathers. And I think mothers appreciated that more. And I know what happens whenever you are presenting a lesson to wives or to mothers. The wives especially want their husbands to pay close attention to what's being said. And sometimes you present a lesson that it makes some women sort of feel bad after they hear the lesson, saying, well, I'm not really that, and I'm basically discouraged now because I'm not really what I ought to be, what I should be. But such lessons are not presented to discourage anyone. And so when you look at this passage, in verse 10, who can find a virtuous? Another word would be worthy. Another word would be excellent. Talking about excellent in character, in the makeup of that individual. For her price is far above rubies. Turn with me to chapter 12. So who can find a virtuous, worthy, excellent woman? In other words, a good, godly woman. In Proverbs 12 and verse 4, it says, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband. Now, he's not talking about that sometimes a woman may want to crown her husband, that kind of stuff. But she is a crown to her husband. But she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. Remember last week we studied about envy. That's how envy is described, as rottenness in the bones. And the proverb writer says that she can be as that. And certainly when she does those things that she should be ashamed, and certainly that her husband is ashamed, that is the result of that. But if you find a virtuous woman, she is a crown to her husband. Chapter 18. And verse 22. Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing. I guess that's one of the reasons why Solomon had so many wives. He couldn't get enough of good things, I guess. And so, or maybe he was trying to find that one good thing. So whosoever findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor or grace of the Lord. In chapter 19, and beginning with verse 13, a foolish son is the calamity of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dropping. Have you ever had a faucet? That thing would not stop. And of course you could hear it and just kept on. You want to jerk the whole stuff out. There are things that constantly that you hear or that you see can get on your nerves after a while. Now, it may not you, but with some of us, it does. And the proper writer says, a contentious woman is like a continual dropping. I don't know how to say this without yak. Okay, I've heard that 100 times. I'm not saying I have heard that. I'm saying, people hear that over and over and over. Well, he won't listen to me. Oh, he hears you. Now, what you mean by he's not listening to me is he's not doing what you want him to do. That's what you mean by that. It's not listening. He can say, I hear you. Of course, your next response is, why don't you do what I have said or what I've told you, that kind of stuff. Now, I get all these examples from people that I'm around, okay? And especially when we used to travel more on trips with some ladies, they have given me a lot of sermon material over the years. And it got to the point where I decided I just can't handle this anymore. And I'm cutting out these trips. I got so much sermon material. And, but it doesn't have to be in family. Maybe at work, at school, wherever. Even with some other members of family besides your wife or husband. Some people can get on your nerves and just sort of eat at you. And sometimes it's better just to try to get away if you can. A little quiet time, and sometimes that is good. In verse 14, he says, house and riches are the inheritance of others, of fathers, and a prudent wife is from the Lord. Notice the contrast between the wife described in verse 13 and the wife described in verse 14. A prudent wife is one that acts wisely. She acts wisely. She makes good decisions. And so he says that she is from the Lord. When you have a couple, husband or wife, both act wisely toward each other and listening to each other, hearing each other, paying attention to each other, and certainly making wise and good decisions in reference to the relationship with each other. Always, whatever decisions are made, the first thing that must be considered is, what effect does this have upon my relationship with the Lord? The second decision is, the second thing that's going to affect those decisions, is this best for my mate? That's the second factor that must come into consideration. And when you have both husband and wife making decisions along that line, the Lord first, my mate next, then wise decisions will be made. In chapter 21, it is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. That's the same word as the word contentious, as we looked at previously. In fact, I guess the writer wanted to make sure to get this point across, because these very same words are also repeated in chapter 25 and verse 24. Just in case you missed it the first time, here it is again. And then in verse 19, it is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman. The husband comes in to the house that evening. And he can tell his wife things have not gone well during the day. It could have been some things with the kids that day. It could have been some of the things just not working right that she'd been trying to work with and work on that day. And of course, she's got a headache. And he comes in and he starts complaining, griping about his day went. And he's not getting a sympathetic ear. But he keeps on. And she's about ready to explode. Basically, before you continue, I want to tell you some things that happened today in my life. And he sees already he's in trouble. And so he says, excuse me, just a second. He goes out. And he comes back in. He says, honey, what kind of day have you had today? I want to hear it. Maybe I can do something or say something to help you. That's one way to handle it. That's probably acting wisely. So even the proverb writer did have some things said about women that were not good because of their actions, because of their decisions that they made in life. But when we look at this passage in Proverbs chapter 31, so let's look at some of these verses here. Again, verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? If a husband is blessed with such a wife, he has that which is a great treasure, that which is a great value. And he needs to express words of appreciation certainly to the Lord, but also to his wife. He doesn't have to post it everywhere over Facebook, other social media. He can if he so desires. But he needs to express it personally. And not only does he need to express it personally, but he needs to show by what he does how much he values or treasures his wife. Verse 11. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. Notice the word trust. Yes, she is a treasure. She is one that he has great trust in. Even in running things in the home, in the house. He doesn't have to be looking over her shoulders all the time. But he has confidence. He has trust in her. And she knows that. And she has trust in him. That relationship is not going to go very well whenever something comes up that causes a lack of trust in each other. And even when something happens that does cause a lack of trust, apology is offered, forgiveness is extended. And that means that is not brought up ever again. If he or she does something again, similar to what they did before, they can cause one to have a lack of trust in that mate. You cannot go back and start bringing up the old stuff. Because it is as now as if nothing was ever done that was wrong. So there is that trust, having confidence in each other. Verse 12. She would do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She is not even thinking about. And when I talk about the wife, the woman this morning, this would also apply to the man, to the husband, if you will. But the focus in this passage certainly is upon the wife. She is not thinking about doing anything that's evil in relationship with her husband. All she is looking for are opportunities to do good. And it's not a thing, okay, I did good for you last month. That ought to be good enough for the rest of the year. It's not that kind of situation. And the ideal here is that she that doeth good, she continues to do that. And therefore she's not looking to do evil to her husband. And even if he was to come along and he was to say to her, honey, let's... Now, I know this is something they normally would not do, and probably it's not the right thing or the scriptural thing to do, but let's do this. And she responds by saying, no, we can't do that. I'm not going to do evil to you, and I'm not going to do evil with you. And that's what he needs to hear. We have an example of a couple, don't we, in Acts chapter 5. Ananias and Sapphira. They both did evil. Adam and Eve did evil. The man should have said, no, we can't do that. We're not going to do that. As the prophet writer reminds us that this virtuous woman the husband greatly trusts is the one that's always looking out for his best. He's always going to do that which is good and will not do that which is evil. In all the days of her life, she seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is industrious. She's willing to do what needs to be done. Whatever she's able to do, whatever she's capable to do. It may be, in times past, and growing up on the farm and that kind of stuff, time to start, of course, is daybreak, the time to end, sundown. And I know many years ago in the past, wherever the husband went, the wife went. If he was in the field, that's where she was. Working side by side. And so he describes this woman as being able to and willing to do whatever she can. She's like the merchant's ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She's very resourceful, suggesting to us of selling and buying things and taking care of the household, if you will. She riseth also while it is yet night. There are some people who are not morning people. That's okay. I mean, a person may work till midnight or 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't expect that person to get up at 4 o'clock the next morning, unless he desires to. And just because he may sleep to 6 or 7, I'd go, well, what are you doing laying in bed so long? Well, you don't know. He's been up all night working, doing things. So, sometimes people get bent out of shape. They do get bent out of shape and thrown off shape. And so we talk about morning and evening and that kind of stuff. But she likes to rise in the morning, give the meat to her household, take care of them, and even take care of her servants. At least be there beside them, helping them do things. She considereth the field and buyeth. With the fruit of her hand she planteth the vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She was not in any way, shape, or form a lazy person. Ready to do whatever needs to be done. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. Whatever she does, in the selling and the buying of things. She makes wise decisions, and that's good. Her candle goeth not out by night. Probably had reference to leaving a light on in case of an emergency. If you're in a house, sometimes an emergency happens and it is pitch dark in there. Sometimes you can make a mistake and hurt yourself very quick like. And so she makes preparation for things. Makes preparation for things. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor. Not only she does whatever she does for her family and those in her household, she's also concerned about others outside the house. She is willing to give to those who are in need. And she's looking for such opportunities. Remember, as Paul said in Galatians 6 and verse 10, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, but especially unto them which are of the household of faith. In 1 John chapter 3 and verse 17, John says, but whoso hath this world's goods, and seeth his brother have need, but shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? And both of those verses is talking about where there is the opportunity to assist, to help in a good way. And you have the means to do so. Then you need to take advantage of that opportunity. Sometimes you may not know about the opportunity. Maybe times you don't have the means to do what needs to be done to help. But when you do have the means and you do have the opportunity, then action must be taken. And this virtuous woman was the one certainly who provided not only for her own family, but also provided for the poor. She also reaches forth her hands to the needy. It didn't make any difference, the person or the persons. There have been times, and I'm sure you have experienced this too, you're trying to decide, you have the means, you have the opportunity, but something about their situation doesn't just feel right. And it seems like some red flags are popping up, and you don't know quite what to do. In other words, you don't want to enable a person who just trying to get something from you. And yet, the person may sincerely need what he's asking for. But something doesn't ring right. In situations like that, more times than not, unless something really pops up that tells me something, this is not the right thing to do, that I go ahead and do what needs to be done. And if I get taken advantage of, I get taken advantage of. I hate to be in a situation where I had the means and opportunity to do something, to help in a good way, and I chose not to do it. How do you deal with situations like that? I know it's easy just to say, well, you know, when I hear people say, well, I can't do anything right now. I mean, if you have the means, and here's the opportunity. You say, I can't do anything right now. What does that mean? You're leaving the impression with the individual that you don't have the means by which to help. And so you're lying. You're lying. Now, I know over the years, people would come to the church building asking for help. You know, at different places we have lived real close to the interstate, and we're like in a small area, but we're close to interstate, and so you get people all the time. And had a person call one day, and he said, I'm needing some help, and we talked about what he was needing. And he said, I know a lot of preachers, he says, in the Church of Christ, and some of them are real close friends. I said, you do? Yeah. Well, that's good. Who are some of those? And every name he mentioned, if I was to mention their name, you would know them. It was, as we would say, big name preachers, people who are well known in the brotherhood. Wow, you know all those men, yeah. I said, we're not very far from the interstate. I said, just come on down toward the church building and we'll talk when you get here. And while you come, I will call some of these preachers that I know personally. Since you're friends with them. Guess what? I guess he ran out of gas before he got to the building. Sometimes like that, things happen. You can ask just a few questions and you can, okay. Now, if you need some gas, we'll go get some gas. I'm not giving you money. We'll get you some gas. Need some food? We'll get some food. Okay? This lady was willing to help wherever and whenever she could. She is not afraid of the snow for her household. For all her household are clothed with scarlet. She's not afraid of the snow for her household. She made preparation for the winter. She made preparation for the clothing for the winter for her family. It's not like, winter's coming. We don't have any winter clothes, so we got to hurry up and do something. No, she made preparation. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. You see, her reputation is such that it helped him to have a good reputation as well. You know how it is. Sometimes the husband or the wife, by what they do and by how they act, not only are they destroying their own reputation, they also can certainly hurt the influence of their mate. But she was not one like that. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. In character, this woman was strong. Talking about in good things. In honor, she stood out. She opened her mouth with wisdom. Look at that phrase. She openeth her mouth. And sometimes what happens when that occurs? People open their mouth, and it's not with wisdom. But this lady, when she opens her mouth to speak, it is with wisdom. And in her tongue is the law of kindness. And I like these verses. In fact, I like all these verses here in this passage. But notice the emphasis in verse 28 through 31. The ideal of praise for this woman. Her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain. Sometimes, of course, those things are not going to last. But a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. This woman is so blessed. She is blessed and praised by her children. She is blessed and praised by her companion. She is blessed and praised by her community. She is blessed and praised by her Lord. And as we would add today, she is blessed and praised by the church. That's a beautiful picture of a good and godly woman. Brother Fred, will you lead us in a dismissal prayer?
Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this time to gather here and study a portion of thy word. Heavenly Father, we ask that you be with each and every one of us as we apply these things to our lives. Heavenly Father, we ask that you will be with all those that are of the household of faith, that they will continue to build in that faith and that we can serve thee as the best of our ability. Heavenly Father, we ask that you give us this day that we can sing praises to thy name and study thy word, that we can apply it to our lives so we can serve you better. Yes, that as we go through this service, that all the things that we say and do will be in accordance with thy will. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.